Welcome to a Patron requested video. You can get one of these by giving me $15 on Patreon. This request comes from Jacob Bilo asking me to talk about and give my thoughts on the Avenue Q musical. I mean to get into Avenue Q for a while now, ever since 2015, 2016, ever since I saw it be advertised in the town that I first moved to in Indiana. And before that, it was kind of tangentially related to me, or I knew kind of it before I knew that the songs were from it. My brother used to sing If You Were Gay, and I had no idea where it came from, but immediately my first thought was, that sounds terrible. Not terrible oh, it's a bad song, but more terrible it's probably a problematic song, especially considering what I thought my brother was into at the time. It just seemed like one of those kind of troll songs, oh, it's funny because it's talking about person being gay and that's the joke. And how I actually feel about it now, we'll get to. The first note I have written is that the opening number is basically a sarcastically cheerful version of Skid Row from Little Shop of Horrors. That's what it comes off to me as, and it very much is in your face oh, everything sucks, but it's okay, but everything sucks. That's kind of my perception of it. I also apparently wrote down that the Avenue Q song is basically Cheerful Rent, which I think is still on point, at least in my mind. It's basically a mixture of the start of Little Shop of Horrors and Rent if you put forced smile on it. Then getting to If You Were Gay, I don't know how I feel, because I feel at once the joke is talking about someone being gay. And I don't quite find that funny. I can see an argument being made that the joke is more the fact that Nikki is being so coming out strong, hey, if you were gay, that'd be okay. And of course doing it in a funny way. But again, I don't find that funny. I still feel the joke is if you were gay, just the fact of saying someone could be gay. Then again, this is my first time legitimately listening to the song, so I could be wrong, and admittedly I've only seen and listened to the show once, so for all I know, maybe I'll have different opinions as I go along if I do return to the show, because I'm gonna get to it early, but I found a lot of the songs kind of unremarkable. Maybe it's because I was watching a bootleg, but none of them really caught me. I wasn't that interested in them. I wasn't coming along, or they didn't stick in my mind afterwards, and I don't really have an interest in returning to the soundtrack, which returning to the soundtrack is often the thing that gets shows lodged in my brain. Again, not necessarily that it's bad, but it just didn't hook me. I found the show very cynical, it revels in the lies that we tell ourselves, especially after college and getting into young adulthood. Basically, when we start living what's called adult life, or I could even see it applying to basically after you're out of high school, after you've flown the nest. It's kind of like how when you're a teenager, you tend to lean towards more dystopian and what's the word? Shows like Darwin's Game or Sword Art Online, where, oh, the world is actually so dark. Kind of like that, because you're coming off of, a mentality of everything's okay. But then as you're getting older and starting to see the world for it actually is, then you start leaning more into the extreme dark version. And that's kind of what I think of the show as being a product of. It's not the sugar-coated fantasy that our parents kind of led us to believe it is. It actually kind of really sucks. I also kind of really appreciated how they differentiated between, the benign, racism that can kind of be corrected and that is ultimately not harmful, just something you kind of want to keep an eye on in case it becomes one, to malignant racism with, what's-her-face, big boobs, being out and out, wants to hurt Lucy Monster, whatever the main monster's name is. She wants to hurt her for the fact that she is a monster. Whereas, Princeton, I think his name is, Princeton and Lucy and all them, like, joking about the kind of racist ideas they hold. Like, they ultimately aren't that harmful because they're not acting on it, which I can appreciate that differential. I'd need to examine it a lot more to really understand how I feel about it and if I agree, but it seems to be kind of like the argument for a racist joke versus calling someone the N-word with a hard R. Speaking of racism, I did kind of find the characterization of, I think her name is Merry Christmas, the Japanese lady. I found her characterization to kind of be funny. Like, at some points it was like, oof, are they really going there? But on the other hand, it also, like, again, I've only seen this once, so it doesn't stick in my mind as much, but there were moments I actually appreciated with her, and I'm glad that she and generic white comedian dude, they didn't end up being that stereotype of, like, oh, she's the domineering one, and, you know, it's actually an unhappy, like, marriage relationship, and they're just gonna break up at the end, and oh, she's forcing him into a wedding, and, you know, you get, like, hints of that, but it seems like in the end, they are happy together. That's pretty cool. All in all, I think Avenue Q is kind of every college grad's, like, reality, or how they perceive their reality. That they spend years of their lives toiling away at higher education, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere. For very few people, the piece of paper they spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars in many cases on just doesn't take them to where people said it would. They don't have a great job. They don't have a path just laid out for them based on their degree. Hell, half the time they just get a useless degree, but no one tells them that it's a useless degree until after they're out of school. Kinda like our college system is made to make you fail and wring every little penny out of you. And I think it spends a lot of time reveling in that idea, but not really exploring it, but just more like pointing it out and being hashtag relatable, which is okay, like, especially if you're in that mindset, and frankly, if this is your first time encountering that idea. Because as someone who has encountered this, like, fuck college idea, it's not new to me, and it doesn't grab me. Like, especially the way it's presented here, because, again, I've already seen it, and I've already internalized it, so it's not revolutionary, and it seems like this show really, really tries to ride off the back of, like, everything actually sucks. It's not the fairy tale that we all thought it'd be. So, as someone who's already gone through and seen that done in other media, the show doesn't hold up for me as well. I think it very much is a show that would do better if it's your first time encountering these ideas. One thing I did appreciate was the kind of high note of, do we need a purpose? Like, most people don't have a purpose, so just live for now. And I kind of appreciate that. Like, in the back of my head, I think there's a role for everyone to play, like, in some way. But how are you going to identify that? It doesn't work like it does in media, where you wake up one day and you just know what you're going to do, or you have this massive revelation. Instead, you kind of just fall into a purpose of some sort, and it's often a purpose that you've crafted, not some purpose of a grand design. So I greatly appreciate that Princeton, who has basically spent the whole show on and, like, almost ruined his relationships over trying to find a purpose, that he was the one who had to realize that maybe he just doesn't have one. And hey, that's okay. Overall, I think this show is kind of tepid for me. Again, it doesn't explore anything really that new to me, except for trying to differentiate, like, benign and malignant racism. I can't appreciate it's trying to put a cheerful spin on a healthy cynicism, but again, it's just not for me. It's not bad, it's just not for me. I gotta say though, I really, really, really enjoyed the puppetry here. There was so much creativity, like with the boxes and the people holding up the puppets. I love it so much. I want to say that I want to see this adapted more into musicals, but I think there's there's gonna be some... It won't work for every musical. It's gotta be a little bit particular in the kind of story that's being told. But I think the great part of it is that Avenue Q didn't have to be kind of a Sesame Street type story. Although I can tell that's what it was trying to go for, like a cynical version of Sesame Street. But I think it could have done okay without being that way, because the Sesame Street aspects kind of don't matter a lot, except for the fact that they want to, like, separate monsters from basically everyone else, regular puppets and humans, which ends up to work out very well with the puppets. I just want to see the level of creativity that was put into the staging of Avenue Q, because this very easily could have been a bargain bin show, but instead they choose to interact with puppets, and figure out how that would work in the world of the musical and how it would work on stage. It all very much makes me want to try to get into puppetry, which I don't know if that's a good idea for me, especially because I can't really make my own puppets, and what am I going to do with one? Yeah, so final thoughts on Avenue Q. It was fun, I guess. I found the story a little bit basic, and especially the whole main idea that the world sucks, especially after you get out of college, but hey, find people who don't make it suck and you'll be okay at least. I found that idea pretty well tracked in my experience. But not to say that someone else might not enjoy it. Heck, I think I'd recommend it for other people to look into. I mean, depending on your taste, of course. Because it very much does ride the line of tasteful... what's the word? Envelope pushing? And just being outright lowbrow humor. I think it rides the line okay enough, but maybe not enough for me to appreciate it, because frankly, it's just not my style of humor either. But I love the creativity on offer and just the talent that was shown in this musical. Frankly, I think this is kind of the millennial musical. The musical of the millennial generation. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Avenue Q. Thank you for the video request.